What we're looking at here is the development in the black square on the west side of Kippendavie in the beach. And in this map from 1910, we see a century ago what this area was like. The very bottom is Lake Ontario, the top is Queen Street, and where the question marks are indicates these super deep lots that are 500 feet across nominally. And what do you do in that area? So we have below the site the infill that was done on Buller a century ago. Now here we're looking at Kippendavie to get a sense of the character of the housing in the upper left shot, and we see on the upper right how the housing on the foreshore has been replaced as a park. The lower left shows Buller Avenue to give a sense of that, and in the lower right we have Kippendavie looking north towards Queen Street. You can get a sense of the scale and the character and the vintage of these houses. Here we see at the same scale an aerial photograph, and the green at the bottom shows where the foreshore housing has been replaced into a park, and again the deep lot on the east side of Kippendavie has been made into a park. We see the Buller Avenue development, and off to the west we see where the Woodbine racetrack has been replaced with housing with some density along Woodbine, the main street on the edge, and the interior houses was left. And with the red site with a question mark is a question, what do we do with this deep land that's not really been planned or organized? Here we see some attempts in the area. We have 90 Kippendavie in the upper left, which is its townhouse scheme turned sideways. Upper right is 80 Kippendavie, which is an apartment in a block in a park concept. So the lower left shows 60 Kippendavie. The site in question is actually just to the right of that. And the bottom right shot shows the rear lane and lands and the treed structure and general unorganization. Here we have the addresses just to identify the block areas. And in terms of the significant scale on the on the right, the red is the site, that's 66, and obviously the properties on each side go to its significance and appropriateness. From there we look at the property to the rear, which is 123 Woodbine, and again across Woodbine we have the main street structure of houses, and then the far left is the housing within the block. Here we get a sense of the housing. This is Kew Beach view looking to Woodbine in the upper left, and we see what the housing in Woodbine is like. Upper right we see 123 Woodbine, which is a 3-story condominium. The lower left gives us in more detail what Woodbine west side is like in terms of its density and configuration, and the lower right shows you a typical street in the interior of the Woodbine development. Here we see the density, and again going from the least, in this case, to the most, starting with the yellow, we see actually that the townhouse scheme and apartment building to the north of the site are at 0.65 times coverage, and then to the south immediately is 0.81, and behind it is 1.0. And then across the main street we see the intensity at 1.6 and the interior blocks at 1.1. The site itself is at 1.96. Now if we look at the open space and we go from least to most, we see that actually this application has the least amount of open space. And then we see the organized Woodbine housing was done at a 60% rationale. And then we see at 66% in the blue the townhouse scheme and the condominium behind the site. And then the site with the most amount of open space is actually immediately to the north of the site. And again, the project to the south has a substantial amount of open space. Here on the last page we have the comparison of the projects lined up together. In the orange is the density, and in blue is the open space. And we can see at the very bottom the scale. So the scale there is in terms of times coverage for density in the orange, and its percentage in terms of open space in the blue. It's obvious as we look at the adjoining properties on Kippendavie to the site at number 66 that they have much less density by far than the application here, and they have more open space. Below the Kippendavie examples, it is faded out slightly just to indicate the fact that these are conditions of buildings on the left and the right side of Woodbine Avenue, which is a main street where you do expect to get more density, and one would expect to see less open space. although actually here they do not badly. And then again at the very bottom we see the interior blocks in the Woodbine tract, which actually indicate to me what is more appropriate for an interior development within a neighborhood away from main streets.